Welcome to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif on Rogers TV. And Mike, it is 2024. We're a few weeks into it.
It is, and yes.
And people are coming off of what? The highs of being maybe on vacation or some holiday or Christmas related celebrations. First credit card statements are probably starting to come in.
Sure they are.
Annual mortgage statements are coming in for some. Maybe the T4s are starting to trickle in.
Well, people are thinking finances more than maybe at this time any other year, given the fact that we've just come through more or less a recession. We were dealing with interest rates. Mind you, if you were out shopping prior to Christmas, going to Costco or any of the big box stores out there, the parking lots were full. This talk about the crash and burn economy that we have here doesn't seem to be reflected in people's behaviors. Everybody's still spending.
Well, listen, we wouldn't be us if I didn't have a slightly different opinion. I think there's still some of that to come. I really do.
It's what they're spending that we should question.
Yeah, absolutely. Where are our spending behaviors? We'll get into that today, I'm sure, a little bit. I think part of it might be, I'm going to throw this out there, we might be still in a little bit of a denial phase. Can I eke it out a little bit longer without changing my behaviors? But certainly there's no shortage of talk about the people's expressing concern or gripe about grocery prices and other prices there. But as we said, really the statements are coming in. People also traditionally like to talk about their New Year's resolution. I'd love to do a straw poll just to see anybody still maintaining their resolution a couple weeks into the year, or are we already giving up on those and saving them up for next year?
Well, yeah, we're a month in now, so yeah, put the gym membership away and get on with things. But I just want to touch back on one thing that you're saying, the denial, and I thought about that for a second. We're now the largest generation, millennials, Gen X. It's the biggest part of the population. Have they ever lived through a recession before?
It's a great
question. Not really. If they did, they were
Yeah.
quite young when they did. As adults, they've never seen that. So the behavior patterns that they are displaying here may be different from previous generations who maybe saw those recessions once or twice, or our parents and grandparents who may have gone through or caught the tail end of the Great Depression and that. So it's a whole different mindset out there.
I'm glad you brought
finances.
that up. I really am. And I think if we were to do a deep dive into this and an intellectual dive into this, which means we probably need to bring someone else on the show.
But who knows what they're talking about.
Who knows what they're talking about. But if we were to analyze statistics, if we were to look at, listen to and read up on what the economists are saying, but if we were to also marry that to what maybe psychologists are saying, or psychiatrists, people who are studying the human brain and human behavior are saying, I have a funny feeling that much of what you're talking about has to do with a slow, gradual shift in our behavior as to what our expectations for our life and what we could possibly accomplish includes.
Not to mention, too, is a word of the daily news is no longer taken as gospel by many. So if it's being reported that the economy's crashing, this and that, there are many who are going to be in denial of the facts being presented.
You're absolutely correct. Yeah. You're now deemed, if you're reading the news and you're not doing independent study, you're not clearly thinking, you're listening to what the mainstream media is telling you. And I would actually say that there are times where I side with that opinion.
Interesting world we're living in, interesting times.
It is,
sure.
But to your point, you go back a generation or two, because you talked about you're not sure that anybody in this generation, whoever we're talking about particularly, has actually endured and gone through a recession, mild or otherwise. Our expectation from a generation or a few ago was there are no other priorities other than buying a home ownership and building a family, etc. Today, it's I don't necessarily expect to buy my car. I just have to make the weekly payment or the monthly payment to drive a car.
It's kind of a month-to-month economy, isn't it? Yeah. Right. There's no long-term thinking anymore, or less long-term thinking for sure.
Whether or not I'm a renter, a tenant in someone else's home, or whether I'm living in my own that my name is on title, is my expectation to pay off my mortgage, or is my expectation just to keep the roof over my head?
It's how much is that going to cost me a month, and
lifestyle.
Rent versus own. What those monthly outputs are going to be is more important than anything else, I think.
So we could have a conversation around principles and best practices, or we could decide to shift our conversation. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, in terms of let's study what people's expectations are and what are they living up to. So when we talk about coming off of Christmas, we just went from Christmas break to you know, a much deeper conversation. But really, I think what we talked about before we came on air is, typically speaking, January is a bit of a moment for reset.
Yeah. And we've talked about, you know, in the greater economy, what that means. But with regards to real estate, in the past few years, January's come, and I think a lot of realtors came to the realization the spring market has started early. People were out there. There were buyers. There were sellers. This year, not so much. It's people are still licking their wounds from, you know, higher interest rates and dealing with whatever financial crisis they've been up against. We're on the tail end of that, you know, the big, you know, COVID, everybody working from home and everything else. So we're still in that trying to find our place in the world kind of stage here. And there's a lot of fear or trepidation about getting out and buying. I've been doing open houses through January. Lots of people coming out and looking around, but they're typically those tire kickers. So I think it's people who are going, I like the idea of owning a home, but I really need to get myself psyched up here before I'm actually going to take the leap.
So later on, a little bit down the road into the show, we'll talk about maybe a particular example of what's happening in the market today, and maybe we have a real case scenario of what it's like to sell a home in this market. But let's talk a little bit more, broad strokes, a little bit about it, because you talked about coming off the tail end and that your belief was that maybe the recession wasn't kind of what was the doom and gloom that might have been forecasted. I will suggest to you that I was just looking at, you know, some recent articles.
Or was it manufactured, some may say?
Well, we will have that conversation. I'm going to pull out the tinfoil for you, because the fact of the matter is I actually, you know, if someone wants to call that tinfoil thinking, then so be it. It's just the facts, right?
It is just another perspective.
It is just the facts. So here are some facts. Let's talk about this. Recent article, I believe it was in the, I want to say the Globe or the Financial Post. Durham region, this is one scenario. And before anybody jumps down my throat, there are more scenarios. I'm just going to speak about one.
Okay.
There are plenty of these. You look at the Toronto market, particularly the condo market. You look at the number of, even recently here in Simcoe County, the number of developments that actually went on hold, or they had to return the deposits, or they canceled the development entirely. There is one just recently in Durham region, I believe, where in a single subdivision, and this is unprecedented. In a single subdivision, 40 people walked away from their deposits because they could not qualify to actually take possession. Now, what does that mean? It means that 3-4 years ago, I'm inventing that number, but it's kind of a fair number to say between 3 and 5 years to get some of these developments from breaking ground to fully built, when you talk about plan of servicing, going before council, et cetera. So a couple of years ago, they put a deposit. Interest rates were in the 1 to 2% range.
And they qualified fairly at that time at 1 or 2%.
They only had to put down.
It's not that their scenarios changed, it's the banking scenario has changed.
They only had to put down maybe $5,000 on signing, and then between signing and the date of taking possession, there was a schedule to put down 5, 10 more in terms of installments. And between signing and not taking possession, interest rates theoretically, the benchmark rate went up, call it 400%.
They changed the game on them.
The value of the home theoretically
came down a bit.
Went from what it was at pre-sale time to, for a townhouse, went from $300,000 to $900,000. So theoretically, they built up equity. If they were to put a for sale sign on it and sell it the minute they took possession, they'd have this instant equity in their home. But they could no longer qualify because of the interest rates going up. Now today, so the reason why I'm saying this is we've had some conversations, and I know you've got your thoughts on the finance minister and the deputy prime minister being one and the same, talking about where we are and having to cool the economy and having to cool the housing market. These homes have now plummeted in value, and that same builder is selling them in a fire sale for $500,000.
So where are the real winners and losers there? It seems to me it's a series of losers. There really is no winner in that scenario. The reality is, and this is not to take away from the seriousness of this or any concern or thoughts for those people who are caught up in this, is over the bigger picture, real estate economies go up and down. There's fluctuation. We've been riding a high for a long time, so a lot of people have lost sight of that. Again, millennials have only ever seen a positive real estate economy and increasing prices year over year in the time that they've been adult, in that home buying age range. So to see things suddenly drop, it's like the end of the world. But it's happened, and it will happen again in future. And the casualties are those people who make decisions, purchase decisions, right at those pinnacle moments when it is turning. You may not foresee it, and so you put that deposit down. I know many people who bought right at that peak, moved into their new house. It's now coming up on renewal time for them, and they're looking at a doubling of month-to-month costs for their home.
So the moment a townhome in Durham region is worth $1 million, which would be on par for that same townhome theoretically in Toronto not so long ago, or in Manhattan. I'm probably stretching a little bit, but Vancouver, for example.
Yeah,
okay.
Or Dubai.
We're not talking about the investor class only looking to build their asset and their real estate portfolio, because we got to be careful about how many sides of our mouth we're going to talk out of when you're the finance minister or the deputy prime minister or the prime minister, for example. Because statistically, if we're aiming and bringing in 500,000 people to Canada as landed immigrants, PRs, new Canadians, whatever you want to call our growing population, you've got to have the homes to put them in, right?
Yeah.
This is not an isolated incident.
On that. And
we're talking about students who can't find housing. Yeah. We're talking about Canadians who can't find housing, who are living in encampments.
We were brave enough to hold a spotlight to that reality many years ago as things were starting to change. The fact that immigration numbers are not supported by the number of new houses being built in this country, and how that's a contributing factor. And we did it with a little bit of trepidation because, it's kind of a third rail thing to mention immigration. I mean, the Canadians are shifting their mindset towards immigration. It's not that they're against immigrants.
No, they're not.
There's nothing
Stop
racial
making it a
with
wedge
regard
issue,
to
people. Yeah,
no,
exactly.
It's just about the raw numbers itself. I mean, it might as well be Ontario worried about half the population of Alberta moving to Ontario. There's going to be ramifications for that. And this is something, I mean, we have watched a doubling of the number of annual immigrants coming into our country over the past few years. And one of the things that doesn't get talked about, it keeps the reasoning is we need the workforce. We need to bring in workers here. But here's something that doesn't get mentioned, is that statistically about 2/3 of new immigrants to the country will vote for the party that was in power.
Currently in power when they came in.
Absolutely. They came in.
Let's
so
pick
tell me
this
that's
up.
Not a factor.
No, it is absolutely
We're
a factor.
coming close to a commercial here, I think.
I think we are going to go to break right now, but let's come back and pick that up, okay? Because I think that is a valid talking point. Yeah. It is no surprise that we are within 12 months of a federal election, whether it's going to come in April or whether it's going to come in 12 months. And certainly one has to believe that there's some jockeying for position. We will pick this topic up when we come back on the other side of the break. Stay with us for more of Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. And if the first segment was any indication of how the balance of this show is going to go, I think we're in for a good time and a good, strong, vibrant conversation.
For sure.
We really started off the conversation around new year, new habits, new beginnings, and it's the third week of January. How many of us have tossed those to the side and we're back to business as usual?
Yeah.
And it really has sort of morphed into, again, the conversation around what are we facing as a reality in the market? What are we facing in reality in terms of our personal lives? How do we separate and should we separate what we're hearing in the media, what we're seeing on the headlines versus what's the reality at my kitchen table? What's the reality in my life?
That reality is.
And go ahead.
I think that the kitchen table reality is more reflective of what's actually happening out there versus the reality that, say, the Bank of Canada is deal with, because many of the reasonings to support them raising interest rates still exist today. Nothing's really changed there. And you were talking about this before the show. Yet now they're talking about bringing rates down gradually, which I think they need to do. But they can't say this is now happening as a result of those rates going up, so therefore we're ready to do it. They're just now going, well, we've done this for a while, but nothing really changed. Oh, let's bring them down.
Yeah.
What's the motivating factor for bringing them down then?
Let's have that conversation. So there was no justification. Okay. Oh wow. That just went off in my mind that apparently, according to the federal courts in Canada, there was also no justification for exercising the Emergencies Act. But since we might say that in a court of law, they might say, Judge, that goes to character. Okay, so was there justification for how and what they did? Let's be clear. Absolutely, 100%, in my personal and professional opinion, we were holding rates artificially low for far too long.
Yeah.
Far too long.
We were.
And therefore, our behavior and the housing prices and the market was far too inflated, and there still is a belief that it is inflated. Now what's interesting is it was inflated. When you compound that with the fact that you've now made home ownership, in terms of accessing home ownership, but also retaining home ownership. You don't have to qualify to buy a house. You also have to qualify
to stay in your house.
The house. Well, now that you've made it virtually impossible for many people and critically damaging
through no fault of their own. Yeah.
I'll argue that it was our own fault. At the end of the day, we were accountable for our own decisions, but poor planning and allowing the landscape to be such that people put themselves in this position. They still have to take responsibility for their own lives. I'm a firm believer in that.
Okay.
We are now seeing a compounded bubble in the real estate market, right? It was already a bubble, but now you make affordability that much more challenging, that bubble suddenly takes on a whole new meaning, right?
I've always been of the mindset that you let the economy, ebb and flow by its own accord, and rather than trying to tweak it, because I think once you bring government and Bank of Canada in to try to manipulate, there's other issues
you're going to pick
create.
up a slight slant in my opinion here, but when the same government that says the budget will balance itself and doesn't allow the economy to figure itself out,
whatever happened to that?
There's a double standard there. Well, whatever happened to that,
there's
we'll find out.
a lot of double standards with this government.
Here's the thing, okay? So rates went up artificially and unnecessarily in terms of the rate of increase.
And too much too soon.
That's what I'm saying.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What are we seeing now? Yes, you're absolutely right. We are seeing rates that have come off their highs. We're in the fives, depending on who you are and what your profile looks like, your credit profile, your credit worthiness, that kind of thing. You might still be a little bit of the sixes. We're certainly off of the sevens. It is anticipated that we will be somewhere in the high fours to low fives before the end of this year. Okay, that is what the experts are saying. I believe that is likely to happen as well. The question is, who wins? As you said earlier, who wins in that scenario? And I'm going to suggest to you that anybody who was caught short and the damage was done in the last 18 months anyway is likely going to struggle to access those newly lowered rates that might get down.
They've been pushed out, and getting back in is far harder. Yep. And there are no clear winners. We don't just drop rates and we'll return back to where we are, like we've jumped in a time machine and now it's the good old days again.
The damage is done.
The damage is done, and there's also the reality that over the course of the last year and a half, 2 years, a lot of people who may otherwise have been planning to purchase a home stepped back from it and go, okay, I can't jump in. I may not qualify, or I just don't feel comfortable getting in here. It's more money than I really want to put in. Let me finish the thought here.
Yep.
And so there's been a buildup of people waiting in the sidelines to get back into the market. Okay, Bank of Canada keeps increasing rates, quiets the market. It takes the price of homes down anywhere from 5 to 10 to 15%, depending on where you are, which municipality. Each has its own number. So now all of a sudden, everybody, you open the floodgate. The people have been lined up waiting. It's like the Boxing Day sale at Apple there. Everybody's waiting to get in to buy the new iPhone, whatever. People are going to pour in to the real estate market again. I anticipate it'll be the same sort of mayhem and craziness that we saw over the course of the pandemic, that we couldn't psychologically figure out what was going on. But this time we know it's people getting back in, and nobody's going to want to miss out, so we'll see that kind of same mob mentality take place. It's going to drive prices back up again. I truly believe this, and not just back to where they were at the peak in January 2020, 2021, whatever it was, where we peaked. It's going to push it beyond that. So for all the effort to moderate our economy here, it might have been a temporary illusion they've created here, but in the long term, I think they've done even more damage here to home prices and home affordability in our country.
Brace yourself, Mike.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to agree with you. But I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. I
heard it here first, folks.
I believe that there are some additional factors actually that are going to come into play.
Yeah.
For starters, I do believe, and I say this with an ounce of caution to anybody, if the damage is already done, it doesn't mean it's game over. It doesn't mean you're out of the market. It means don't
10 milligrams of caution.
Yeah. Don't expect, if you already ran into some trouble and you've got some bruises on your credit, or maybe some worse than bruises on your credit, and those manifest in different ways in terms of credit utilization versus how well you paid it off, et cetera, and your score's not the only thing. Point is this: if you've already done some damage or endured some damage, don't expect to grab hold of those low rates right away. It might be a phased approach while you rebuild and rehabilitate your situation. But here's the thing. One, to your point, anybody who believes that I'm going to wait because I anticipate rates are going to come down, so I'm going to wait to enter the market for the bubble to burst or those prices to continue to decline, I think your math is completely off, and I think your expectations are completely unreasonable.
Your savings going to be erased there with the rising prices.
That's exactly what I'm saying. You are not going to be, there will not be a situation where prices are at an all-time low, even for the last 2.5 years, and interest rates are low.
No.
There will be some correlation between, as the rates come down, the prices will go. So here's the thing. And I'm going to throw a shout out to my friend Derek Battaglia, who is a mortgage broker in Barrie here. Derek, Dominion Lending Centers. He's a friend. He's a great guy, and he had a great quote on social media the other day, and he basically said, "You marry the house, or you marry the house, you marry the price, but you date the rate."
Yeah.
Right? You date the rate. And that's the thing, is pay attention. Sorry, Derek, if I improperly paraphrase that from you. But here's the scenario. The opportunities in getting your foot in the door into home ownership. So if you have not yet acquired and succeeded in getting into home ownership, those prices are going to move, and they're going to increase, and there is going to be some instant or theoretically instant equity built up as if you buy low and build that equity. The rate is temporary. Whether you're signing on for a 1-year term or a 5-year term, it's still temporary, but the likelihood of the percentage of equity that you built offsetting and more than offsetting the rate that you might pay temporarily, that's worth considering.
Yeah. Well, and the pressures that were influencing or pushing prices upwards prior to rates coming down are still there. The government has not done a whole lot other than forming, coalitions and think tanks to talk about what we need to do going forward. And the bottom line is we need more houses. You can talk about it forever, but we need to see shovels in the ground. We need to see money shifting from federal to provincial to municipal, and we need to see this happening. It's happening in token amounts here, there, and everywhere. Will we see more of it? Maybe ahead of a federal election, we might see those purse strings loosened up a little bit. I don't know. But the reality is, all those pressures that were pushing housing prices up before interest rates started coming down are still there.
Now, here's my thing, though. I told you that there were some additional pressures that I anticipate coming on. So we've already talked about the pressure of the rates and the increased activity and the prices going up. We did talk about the pressure, if you want to call it that, of people having a challenging financial scenario. Okay, I firmly believe that both the Bank of Canada and the Finance Minister are absolutely wrong.
They're out to lunch.
They're out to lunch. Let's call it what it is. I firmly believe that.
And their
Why?
agendas are
Political.
are selfish.
Absolutely.
They really are. They're political.
Because people's habits had not changed yet, and we won't see the fallout of the fact that they eventually hit the brick wall of maxing out credit cards, lines of credit, equities, home equity loans, et cetera, et cetera. Those are being advertised all over social media. I'm not against them. I'm just against the wrong usage of them or short-sighted usage of them. Okay, so just be mindful of that. But we can't say the economy's still strong. People are still spending because they're tapping into money that's not quite theirs, not really theirs. But here's the other pressure that we haven't talked about yet. I'm going to make a statement this way. I'm not a doctor, not a scientist, okay? But for all intents and purposes, our reality of the pandemic is over for now, until the next one comes around. But the reality of the pandemic is over. So since the reality of the pandemic is over in terms of home movement and migration, we're not seeing the same amount of people going to be leaving Ontario for other parts of the country, Atlantic provinces, central Canada, et cetera. We're not seeing people leave Ontario. So as the natural market
has slowed,
as the natural market cycles back up and there is pressure on the homes, we're also going to see the additional pressure of people who are not leaving to go to other provinces or other states. And they're going to now compound on that pressure of what available inventory comes in the next few months or
that's
year.
another factor in there. It's
It'll
all
be
interesting. So where does one go, speaking of migration, to get away from it all, to get away from this craziness? Or is there any place?
Well, this is an interesting thing, Mike.
From coast to coast, it's all through the States. It's worldwide that we're dealing with financial adjustment, if you want to call it in a nice way.
Mike, I'm glad you asked the question, and I think it's rather timely that you asked the question, because when we come back from the break, Mike, and folks, we've got some pretty big news. We got some big news to talk about and discuss with you regarding the show and what direction the show's going in, and maybe how some of us have been dealing with it. And I'm going to suggest that when we come back from the break, we'll just leave you hanging there for a minute. When we come back from that break, we'll talk about that big development. So stay with us. We'll be back with more of Hitting Home with Mike and Arif on the other side of the break. Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif, and I don't know how much of a cliffhanger we really teed it up for, but before we went to break, I kind of left, we left some folks at home, just hanging a little bit around the fact that, there's some interesting things going on, and you happened to mention something that I thought was quite timely, Mike, and you mentioned the fact that, there's migration from coast to coast. So, Mike, what's going on?
Well, there always is, and we watch it from here in Barrie in our central location and that. But I'm going to be adding to the statistics myself. My wife and I are planning a move to Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island this spring. This will impact upon us being able to do this show together. I know you're going to continue on with other ideas that you have here at Rogers. But after 23 years living back in Barrie here, we came to the conclusion a number of factors, contributed to that, and we went, it's time for the next chapter in our lives. My wife Sherry, her family is out there in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. We spend a couple weeks there every summer. We're back in around Thanksgiving or Christmas. It's become a second home for me. It's a first home for her. So it just all things point to this being the time to make that move, and so we're excited about this.
Yeah, I'm excited for you, and obviously, I think it's worth talking about in this show. I mean, certainly it's interesting timing that you're doing it, actually, Mike, because we did see in the last couple of years.
In February in the winter time here in Canada, making a move.
They've got icebreakers, but we're on that tail end of that massive migration to Atlantic provinces, for example, and depending on if and when you choose to plant your flag in terms of buying a property out there, I think you're going to be off some of that hype. I think you're actually going to be in a great spot.
And that was an influencing factor with prices there. My wife and I have had the idea of moving out there for better part of 10 years, and so when we're there, we're taking a look at the market, and we've been impressed to see prices of homes there that were in the $200,000 to $300,000 range when we started doing this, that are now more in the $500,000. To be fair, though, the average price for a 3-bedroom home in Charlottetown is about $200,000 less than the average price home here in Barrie, Ontario. So there's still some savings to be had there for making that transition.
I hear you flex some muscles, though, over with the local city and officials, et cetera, and you've managed to get a portion of the land there renamed.
I did. They've named a town after me now, Montague, Prince Edward Island.
Yeah,
So
I think that's pretty fascinating. That's some clout. I haven't been able to pull that off around here.
No. Well, you'll probably get a street named after you eventually. So yeah.
Or a park bench or something like
or
that.
At least some posters up with your name on them, maybe, at the post office.
Posters. Yeah, but no, I mean, I'm happy for you, and I really am excited. Obviously, you've gone through some change, and I want to take just a moment to talk about what are some of the reasons why people move. And obviously, I know you said you've been visiting the area for a better part of 10 years.
Yeah.
Sherry's got some family over there. Obviously, though, all of us have change in our lives.
Well, there's economic reasons. There's change for the sake of change. Just somebody wants to start a new chapter in their life, wants to explore a bit. In our case, it's about family, being closer to some family. It's about moving to a place we're familiar with, which we love, and making that home rather than just a visiting destination. There's been a number of things that have kept us here in Barrie, and by kept that, it's a wrong word, that have lured us and kept us fascinated with Barrie. I mean, I moved here 23 years ago. Love this town, love many of the elements of this town. To be fair, it's not the same Barrie today that it was 23 years ago. Cities grow, cities evolve, cities change. Some of that small town charm that lured me here to begin with is harder to see. We're more having that suburb type feel. There's a lot of influences here, and where we're moving to is kind of like stepping into a time machine and going back to Barrie 1975-80. It feels in many ways.
Yeah, I want to throw a little bit of kudos in your direction, though, because I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm hearing you say what suits my family and me. And the bigger picture of what we want.
And that's not for everybody. I'm not saying this is something, I'm doing this, so kids, you should be doing this too. No, this is just a challenge and a chance that we're willing to take and want to take. So.
Exactly. And the reason is, and we'll get into some of the professional motivations as well, career motivations that you may have stumbled upon or been seeking out. But let's just talk for a moment. You've made a decision to move, and you acknowledge that you sort of were more aligned with a different speed of life, for lack of a better word.
It's a different
But what I didn't hear you say is I did not hear you complain about where we live today. And the reason why I want to say that is...
You want me to do that?
No. Well, I hope that's on you. But here's the thing. What I actually admire and respect about you over the last, we've been doing the show for about 6 years, but I've known you for well over a decade.
Yeah.
Is the fact that you have always been a proponent of where you live and a contributor to how can I make it better. And in fact, I mean, you've referenced the term NIMBY from time to time as you watch council, and you have not spoken in favor of stopping change.
No.
You've said change is inevitable.
It's
how do we
inevitable.
embrace it? How do we make the best of it?
What's the best way to approach and work our way through that change? Because that change is coming, like it or not. Yeah. And for the most part, I think Barrie has progressively gotten better at planning their future. Certainly, the most recent plans put together. There's a clear picture where we want to go. I think a lot of towns, a lot of cities, up until say the 90s or something, things just happened willy-nilly. They really didn't have official plans.
Willy-nilly.
Willy-nilly
Terminology.
is the term. Yeah.
Got it. One sec.
Willy-nilly. Yeah. There's 2 W's, 2 N's, or 2 L's, 2 N's. But yeah. But Barrie does have a focus, and they know we're going to grow. And Barrie has one unique factor, and that is being next door to that elephant, the GTA. And there's a lot of influence there that impacts us. As the GTA grows, we, by default, grow too, as part of that. To pretend we're a separate entity, totally uninfluenced, is total denial, because there are more influences than we ever want to realize, that we're comfortable with, let's put it that way.
And you talk about the fact that your observation and in your opinion as a resident that throughout the course of time, the city and its leaders and sort of those who are planning the future have gotten better at it. And here's the thing. I mean, I think it's fair to say that we could look back not too recent or not too distant past at looking at some of these plans that sort of we're now living with poor planning, or we're living with the impact of a lack of forward thinking. And yeah, we live with it.
There may be incidents of that.
A couple of incidents of it.
But for each failure or plan that's gone awry, there's a new body of knowledge that's gained that hopefully we carry forward. And,
critical.
Yeah.
Critical. And I think what's happening now is, we could talk about the potential to annex portion of Oro.
Yeah, reading about
obviously that's got some people talking, and it's got some people talking in Oro, it's got some people talking in Springwater, it's got some people, residents here talking, some people who don't, who've decided that when you hear 4 out of 5 dentists prove one certain kind of toothpaste, that you only maybe ask 5 dentists. Yeah. No, it's a sample size, and sample sizes are not when it suits us, it's how polling works.
And growth is good. But growth is necessary, but it is and always is uncomfortable.
It is.
It's and there are challenges that present themselves.
So speaking of influences, you're making a decision. You've made some decisions, and they're fairly concrete, that you're making this move to Charlottetown area and
Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island.
Let's talk about some of those influences, because just in the last couple of years, we did hear, read, see the fact that there was some migration out of Ontario and other provinces to Prince Edward Island and surrounding area. What are the impacts that they're seeing right now of what are some of those influences, not just GTA to Simcoe County, but Ontario to Atlantic provinces?
Well, some of them economically. Charlottetown is a growing city too, and it's facing some of the same challenges and some of the same resistance from its residents to that growth and how it's growing. But it's inevitable there as well. It has a strong tourist economy. One of the biggest contributing factors to their tourism industry there is the fact that they're a seaport, and anywhere from April through to into October, there's going to be at any given time 1, 2, sometimes 3 full-size cruise ships docked in that harbor with 3,000 people exiting with credit cards in hand and pouring into the downtown. Now, if you can imagine downtown Barrie, if we had a dock there where at any given time there was a boat where 3,000 people were pouring into the town, how different would our downtown look? How much healthier and more confident and capable would many of the businesses be in the downtown as a result of that? So that's healthy for.
Would there be seasonal spikes, because obviously summer?
Oh, they're seasonal. There's many businesses in the food and beverage industry in and around Charlottetown that just padlock the door in the winter and they go to Florida.
Yeah, well, we have that here with the fish and chip truck, right?
Well,
and it's not.
It's the same sort of thing.
It's exactly the same sort of thing. Absolutely.
And PEI is, for all intents and purposes, one big fish and chip truck. So.
We'll save that as a quote as we send it to the mayor. But here's the point: is that they plan accordingly because they've studied these patterns. They see these patterns. They're geographic in nature. They're tourism-based in nature. They're certainly economic in nature.
Yeah,
but they're planning their year.
Significant agricultural and fishing industries there.
They earn their year in a series of months, in a period of a few months.
Within the tourism, which is typical of many Canadian climate tourist regions, I would think.
So you're about to make a move in that direction. Not only is this a personal change, not only are you looking at some of the influences, there's an economic impact there, but professionally, there are probably going to be some differences that you're going to experience in terms of a professional in the real estate industry. Yeah. You're walking in, it doesn't hurt that your name is synonymous with some
with a local town named Montague.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt.
It would be if I moved here 20 years ago to Barrie and there was, my last name was Shanty Bay or Collingwood, that, it might have helped We shall see. That's yet to be determined.
Not my point. There's going to be some differences there. There's differences in quality of life and lifestyle, and you made a mention that area of today is more sort of representative of 20 years ago.
Well,
here.
there is.
What about technology and the way you deal in trade?
Well, the technology is there. Yeah, they have electricity there on the island now.
Not my point. The way people transact in real estate.
But within the industry, they're on par with how everything's done everywhere else. What is different, and I've yet to experience it firsthand, but in conversations with different realtors who have been there, some who have been there forever, some who have migrated there, a few years ahead of me, and they're giving me a heads up on what's happening, is people have their pace that they kind of work at, and it's not the same rat race kind of pace that we have here, and I don't know what that is. I think it's larger populations maybe kind of influence that, but they're set in their ways there in many regards. They're not totally tuned out for the world. They have all the technology to know what's going on. But you just sense that when you get there in personal discussions and just watching. And it's not like they're all sloths just kind of crawling around. They're just more content at a level where many of us here might think, no, we can't stop and be happy yet. We got to get up to here. We'll never. We're chasing unreachable rainbows here, whereas out there they're just basking in the rainbow that's around them, I think, and that's the philosophical, fanciful answer to that.
Well, I love it, and when we come back from the break, we'll pick up and talk about kind of what's next for you, what's next for us here on Hitting Home.
What's next for Barrie?
Absolutely, so stay with us. We'll be right back with more of Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. The final episode as you know it, as we know it here.
Yes,
but,
Hitting Home with Mike and Arif.
Yeah, been as you said, 6 years that we've been doing this.
6 years that we've been doing it, and a lot has changed in that time.
Absolutely. So in the interest of not, having anybody just turn the channel right now, I don't want to take people down necessarily a play-by-play of those 6 years, but let's give it a little bit of a look and reflection
Some generalities,
back. Lots has changed, Mike.
That have shaped the show, and in that 6-year period, one of the big things is the price of homes in our region and across the country, probably in most regions, has doubled, if not more than doubled in that time. Incomes have not doubled in that time, so it's created different dynamics for the housing industry.
Certainly. Housing pressures, interest rates, as we talked about earlier, we won't go that far down, but more than doubled for many.
Economy.
Payments, right? The ability of people to keep their payments up.
A pandemic, which, 100 years from now, they'll still be talking and referencing the pandemic. It was a big piece of history in general.
But it actually brought on technology, Mike. Actually, it brought on embracing technology.
There was no stopping us and silencing these voices. We found a way to continue on. And funny enough, I recall our first episode that we did remotely, and we had a guest. We had Nick Nanos on the show. And we did not have fancy backdrops. I wasn't even sure what a backdrop was, or if that was something you could put behind you on on the screen. So, when I rewatched that show when it finally came out, I could see my unmade bed in the guest room behind. Yeah, it was fun. Things we learned as we went along.
Absolutely, but if you think about it, actually, the likelihood of us having had Nick Nanos on as a guest at all, let alone 2 or 3 times.
We came to realize that quickly, is this is not a deterrent. This was actually an opportunity here to have guests of a stature and maybe with a schedule that wouldn't allow them to wander into this studio on a Monday morning and record an hour with us.
We've had the pleasure of some fantastic guests and fantastic industry experts, whether that's in the appraisal business or the inspection or other forms,
within
stagers.
Our industries that we work in, people, right from the CEO of ARIA, who's been a guest on the show on numerous occasions.
Yeah, absolutely.
The former mayor of Barrie's been on the show many times. Jeff Lehman, he was good with his time with us, and Alex Nuttall as the new replacement mayor for him, who's this term.
I wonder if that's the term he wants to go by. But
not replacement, no, but our current mayor.
Yeah.
Alex Nuttall, who I'm sure if we were going forward with the show, we would have on as frequently as we had Jeff. We just hadn't had that opportunity yet. But no,
Yes.
it's been interesting.
It has been interesting.
It's been, I mean, we didn't just come in here to share what knowledge we had. This show has been a catalyst for us to learn, to want to have that knowledge and gain that knowledge ourselves so we could pass it on. So I would think, personally, I'm a little bit wiser about real estate in general and about my community here in general for having been a co-host on this show. The knowledge I probably wouldn't have been as motivated to gain that I've gained as a result. So that's been a bonus for me for sure.
Absolutely, we have gained knowledge, and certainly I'll certainly echo what you thought. It's forced us to learn, in terms of what we can share, but it's also given us an opportunity to learn from other experts. Speaking of learning and speaking of what you've learned and what's changed and what you've sort of retained with you over that same time period, you're now in the process of transferring title of your home, selling your home.
Yeah.
What would you say, if anything, that you learned or are employing or utilizing in terms of those skill sets? We've advised and given reason for people to think, if you're going to go into this exercise, if you're going to go into this transaction, be mindful of these things. Of course, it can't be legal advice that we give you, but things for you to ask your broker, your realtor, etc. How does that play out when you are actually
when you're
subject
doing
matter?
that, when you have to switch from being the teacher to being the student. I think it's good, and I think everybody who is a realtor should enter into it as a client of real estate, call it that, every now and again, because it's a good refresher, because not just on the nuts and bolts of what to do, but just the mindset, the stress, the anxiety that you forget. You're not learning it. You don't have it firsthand when you're dealing with your client. You're trying to walk them through. You appreciate it, but it's not the same as when you're experiencing those anxieties firsthand.
So there is an unwritten rule that says in any market, the right seller with the right home in the right condition in the right scenario, priced properly, will attract a buyer.
And the biggest thing in all things you outlined there is priced properly.
That's it.
And that was what we realized. If we were going to sell our house in the first quarter of 2024, it better be priced properly, because there's not a lot of buyers out there at the moment. At the same time, there's not a lot of homes for sale,
and
which
it's
plays
interesting.
to our advantage.
There's a relationship there. There isn't a lot of activity. Nobody wants their home sitting on the market for 6 months, 9 months, a year, and having to drop prices, therefore essentially decreasing the value of their own home.
Well, for every seller with a sign on the land, that's potentially another buyer too.
But at a low point, when it's tough for people to qualify and there is low inventory, et cetera, which yes, it may be in your favor, you did manage to listen and effectively or conditionally sell within.
Take my own advice? Well,
3 weeks,
we
though,
were
right?
listed about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, we're sold conditionally.
That's what I said,
for a few more days.
Let's not jinx that.
Well, they put their finances in order, and there's always a chance, and it's a heightened chance at this point in time, that financial condition is not met. Right. And because we've seen that more and more, because the bar is that much higher for people to qualify, and the banks are that much more stringent these days, as you know full well, being in the business of mortgages. And so we're holding our breath. We're waiting to see, and hopefully, within the next few days, we go from a conditional offer to a firm offer on that home, which then allows us to cement our dates and times for our plans going forward. Because right now there's a bit of a limbo period where you go, if this happens, we'll do this. We're going to do that, but it's contingent on this, and and that's the anxiety of moving, is because there's too many things you can't pin down to an absolute. You can have a general plan, but everything has to happen in a certain order.
So over your 23 years or 20 some odd years as a realtor in this space and in this industry, you've given a lot of people guidance, advice. You've guided them through the process.
Yeah.
You're now doing it for yourself. Is there anything that you're reflecting upon going, geez, I offered all of this advice to everybody else, but now I have to do it myself, that you're realizing something is different about your appreciation for what clients go through now that you're the client?
Well, that's it. Well, it's the value of having the knowledge, having a professional. I didn't rely solely on myself on this. I've been tapping the resources of my broker owner of Remax Crosstown to get through this too.
What's her name?
For someone, Heidi Koistra, who's been a guest on the show. Throw her a bit of a plug here, yeah. Who's a great broker, a great brokerage here in Barrie. Ideally, I will be working for the counterpart to this, the Remax in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, once I get there. For all you who are watching who are planning to migrate to Prince Edward Island, give me a call, give me a shout. And I would suggest, too, anybody who is curious about following my antics going forward, sink or swim, look me up on Facebook and sign up there, and you can
share
follow
your experience.
Because I'm going to share the experiences there that we're having there.
Now, tell me, I think you got the bug in you. I sort of alluded to it a little bit in the last segment, but over your 23 years in this region, I think I don't think you were necessarily sort of brash and loud and up front and on the front cover or anything necessarily. That's maybe not your style, but it should be noted you've been very active in the community, whether it was politically. Working with volunteering during federal elections or provincial elections. You even ran yourself in a municipal election.
It's a learning experience, yes.
Absolutely, but you've also been invested in guiding and shaping the local real estate board through several terms. Sitting as a board member on the local board, and you definitely were a thorn in the side in a positive fashion, I'm sure, to members of council and planning committees and things like that. I have to believe you're going to carry some of that with you. And you got 30 seconds, but
hopefully I can temper some of that with regards to trying to influence city councils there, as many of those past councillors would agree. But yeah, I'm not going to be just sitting on my hands. I see myself as being actively involved and engaged going forward. It's just part of who I am. So.
Well, with that in mind, I'm going to suggest that we'll probably be hearing from you on a podcast or a YouTube channel, and maybe something.
You could have me on a guest on a future show. I understand you're not just going to go totally dormant and silent here, Arif. Nobody can silence you.
No, I've taken a sort of a page out of Dick Wolf's enterprise, and we're going to do a spin-off of some sort for the Hitting Home franchise, as we'll call it. So certainly anybody who's wondering what they're going to do with their lives, thinking that there might be a gap in their lives or their social life or their entertainment, we certainly will be back. We'll reveal some of those details in the near future, but I believe that there will be some version of Hitting Home, and we'll probably take a look a little, it's time for, after 6 years, it's probably a very natural time to do a little bit of an evolution on the show.
Do you have a timeline there?
Yes.
It'll be happening quickly? Or is this going to be like, the public waiting for the Beatles to get back together? Or?
Someday, and someday soon. But no, within the next couple of weeks, we'll probably have something ironed out and figured out. But along the same lines, still talking about things that matter at the kitchen table to people, as we talked about, not being out of touch at such a high level, but what actually matters to people here locally, personal finance, home, mortgages, small business, what it's like to do business, things that matter. We'll be talking about the city as well, but certainly stay tuned for that. We've got a couple of ideas that we're going to bring to you as audience members. But with that in mind, Mike, I got to tell you, it's been fun. It's been an amazing pleasure.
It's been real.
It's
been good.
Thanks for this being your brainchild, actually, because this wouldn't have happened without you, absolutely. And I don't know, I think we're out of time. Just wanted to say thanks to everybody and wish Mike the best, and we'll see you again.
And thank you, Barry.